anyone more thin-skinned? I made a joke about his father being an orangutan once, and he marched into court with his birth certificate and sued me because he's a whiny little bitch. He said to Dana White, you know, Bill said my father was an orangutan, and I really love my father. And I said, well, Mr. President, I did that because I didn't like what you were doing regarding Obama's birth origins. I thought that was low. Again, no anger, just a little smile as if to say, yeah, I get it.
If I can change, and you can change, everybody can change.
The great country of ours is moving very rapidly in the direction of oligarchy. The United States of America today is increasingly becoming an oligarchy. More and more moving toward an oligarchy. We are moving in the direction of oligarchy. We will move even more rapidly in the direction of an oligarchy. This great country is evolving into an oligarchic society. It is called oligarchy, and that is the system we are rapidly moving toward. This is a budget that moves our country rapidly into the direction of oligarchy. A handful of billionaires are moving this entire planet toward an oligarchic society.
We start off with the bad news, which is pretty bad, and that is that under Donald Trump, this country is hurtling rapidly toward oligarchy.
Sunday morning with America's soft economic war with China and President Trump's efforts to de-escalate this weekend. The president now allowing exemptions to his reciprocal tariffs on smartphones, laptop computers, and the machines that make semiconductor chips, all electronics largely produced outside of America. The new temporary policy narrows the scope of items that fall under President Trump's 145% tariff on China and Chinese imports, which this week sparked retaliation from Communist China, which hit back with its own 125% tariff on U.S. goods. More on the escalating trade war with China and its impact on the economy from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon shortly. But first, as President Trump was battling Communist China over the cost of trade in Washington, he was also deploying Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to battle the communist nation's dominance at one of America's key shipping lanes at the Panama Canal. On Wednesday, the U.S. and Panama agreed to a deal that reaffirms Panama's sovereignty and outlines new military cooperation. The president sending troops to the Panama Canal to defend American interests after years of China exerting influence over the vital waterway, in which over 40% of U.S. container traffic passes through that canal on a yearly basis. A $23 billion deal between American investment firm BlackRock and Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison for 43 ports, including 2 ports at the Panama Canal, is now on hold after the Chinese Communist Party announced it is investigating the deal in an effort to stop it. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, just back from the Panama Canal, joins me right now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive. Secretary, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course.
Tell us about the trip and what are the most important takeaways that we need to understand about the Panama Canal.
Well, President Trump said in his State of the Union address, China has too much influence over the Panama Canal and America's going to take it back. And that's exactly what I was charged to do, what we're continuing to do. China's influence cannot control our own backyard, especially a critical waterway, key terrain like the Panama Canal. You mentioned 40% of ships are U.S. ships. 75% are going to or from a port. So we were able to secure 2 historic agreements, one with the Panama Canal Authority, that our ships, our military vessels and auxiliary vessels will travel first and free through that Panama Canal. And then we also signed a memorandum of understanding with the defense secretary over there and the president that established a robust and growing U.S. presence, right? You need to secure that key terrain. So Fort Sherman will reopen jointly with the Panamanians, a jungle school, and we're going to have a larger U.S. presence at the invitation of Panama, working with them to keep the communist Chinese out. If we can't use that waterway in a key contingency, then China has an advantage. Other presidents have allowed us, we've been sort of asleep at the wheel. President Trump has said we need to be serious about our own backyard. That includes a place like the Panama Canal. And I want to thank President Molino a pro-Trump, pro-America president of Panama who's sticking his neck out against communists whose influence was real there, Maria. We could see it. You could feel it. The communist Chinese want to control politicians. They're building infrastructure projects. They want to surveil. They want to take that canal. President Trump says, not on our watch, and we're fighting back.
That's unbelievable. When I spoke with President Trump in an interview last month, he said that all the signage around the canal was all in Chinese. When you're going into it, it's all Chinese signs. When you're coming out of it, there's all Chinese signs. That was sort of one piece of color that indicates how dominant they've been.
Correct. They're building a tunnel underneath the canal they're paying for. What could that be used for? Surveillance of submarines, of ships, bridges over the top, cranes within. We flew by their cranes in that port. Antennas all over them. What are those used to do? We didn't see, by now, they're removing a lot of that signage, but removing signage is not enough. You've got to remove the insidious influence. And in getting these agreements signed, it was a big effort across our DOD with their leaders. But they know that by coming closer to the United States and allowing additional joint U.S. presence, that's pushing out nefarious, malicious Chinese influence. The Chinese didn't like what happened in Panama this week. Not at all. Because this is a return of U.S. leadership, peace through strength, and the course was charted by President Trump.
Do you expect this deal between BlackRock and CK Hutchison to go forward? China doesn't want it to go forward. I mean, President Trump said he'd rather deal with BlackRock, an American company, than a Hong Kong-based company.
Well, I agree with the president. And in sitting down with President Molino of Panama, they had just received the audit, which showed that Hutchinson, the Chinese firm, had hundreds of millions of dollars that they owed. They were going to reveal they had not paid. So this was not a good deal for Panama, whereas the BlackRock deal is more straightforward and an American company. So the Panama would like it. President Trump has said we need it. Combine that with kicking out the Belt and Road Initiative, which Secretary of State Rubio got on his first trip in February, and we're getting to the point where, you know, Panama and the U.S. are shoulder to shoulder saying, get out, China, and that serves us.
Unbelievable. We're going to keep talking about this as it relates to trade coming up. Let me get your take on Iran, Secretary, because, of course, we've had direct talks yesterday. They began in the past. It's been indirect talks with a mediator. But there's Steve Witkoff meeting with the foreign minister of Iran. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that President Trump is dead serious on this issue. He's dead serious that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. He's said that for 20 years. He's been consistent. That is clear. He's dead serious that he wants it done at the negotiating table. He wants it done peacefully. Yeah. And that's why he's going straight to these talks. He set that deadline. These were productive talks yesterday. I don't want to get ahead of our skis. Steve Witkoff does a fantastic job, but it was a good step, and they're gonna go at it again on Saturday. But he's also dead serious that if we can't figure this out at the negotiating table, then there are other options, to include my department, to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear bomb. We hope we never get there. We really do, Maria. But what we're doing with the Houthis and what we're doing in the region, we've shown a capability to go far, to go deep, and to go big. And again, we don't want to do that. But if we have to, we will, to prevent the nuclear bomb in Iran's hands.
I was reading about some of the armament used against the Houthis and these proxies of Iran, and it suggested to me that we were sending a message to ensure that the Houthis and the Iranians understood the kind of capability we have in our military should we need to use them.
Well, we know, Maria, that Iran's taking a look at what's happening to the Houthis and realizing they don't want any part of it. And that's because we're dismantling the Houthis' capabilities. We're even hearing rumblings of them second-guessing what they're doing. Ultimately, we just want to open up our shipping lanes. That's it. It's a very narrow interest with the Houthis, but it sends a clear signal to Iran as well. You're not going to mess with the United States. Iran, come to the table, negotiate full dismantlement of your nuclear capabilities, and then that doesn't have to be your future.
And the president last week with Benjamin Netanyahu unveiled plans for $1 trillion defense budget next year. Massive increase that the president said will provide the country with unmatched military strength. What can you tell us about that, Secretary? Because we've been seeing lots of worries about the Navy, the number of ships in the United States versus what China has. Are you reversing that at this point?
We are rebuilding America's military, which President Trump has charged me with doing. We're going to find efficiencies. You know, we just cut $5.1 billion yet on Friday of useless contracts at DoD. So we're cutting where we need to find, where we can, and there's tens of billions more to find.
Yeah.
But we're adding on top of it a generational investment, Maria. President Trump investing in the F-47, sixth-generation fighter, more ships, shipbuilding, long-range missiles, all the types of future of armaments we're going to need for future conflicts. This is a generational rebuilding because the communist Chinese, are ascendant. They're investing in their military. We're going to achieve peace through strength, and President Trump's going to fund it.
And at the same time, the Democrats are mocking the efforts and mocking you. Hakeem Jeffries released a statement on Thread saying the so-called defense secretary has ordered 400 books removed from the Naval Academy. He came up with a new description of DEI. I'm sure you saw that. Dumb, effing individuals? DEI?
Oh, boy. That's how far they've fallen. It's astonishing, not surprising. Of course, they don't like the fact that we're ripping DEI out of the military and making it colorblind and merit-based. If their whole strategy is, I don't even know how long the video was, didn't see it, minute-long videos on TikTok to call us names while we secure the southern border, kick out Chinese influence, revive the warrior culture inside our military. That's why they lost in a historic fashion to President Trump last time, and their future looks bleak as well. So we're looking at all the ways in which our military academies educate and giving guidance to get rid of DEI, and I think the American people appreciate that.
Secretary, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for all of your efforts.
Thank you, Maria.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, thank you. And as the secretary was making moves in Panama this week, President Trump was setting the tone on trade with adversaries and allies alike in Washington. The president instituting a 90-day pause in tariffs to give countries the time to adjust to the new costs, as well as announcing a lowered 10% base on tariffs with countries that did not escalate or retaliate against his initial tariffs. The pivot coming partly after President Trump caught my interview Wednesday with J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, and after Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent joined me to explain the national security threats and the realities from China. Now, new negotiations are underway with trade partners during this 90-day pause. Here's Treasury Secretary Bessent, followed by J.P. Morgan CEO Dimon, with me on Wednesday.
It's going to be, a bespoke, tailored process for each country. And, as we strike these trade deals, I think that we will see greater and greater certainty. We have a delegation from Vietnam in. I was at the ambassador's residence, the Japanese ambassador's residence here in D.C. for the Cherry Blossom Festival last night, which was fantastic. And a Japanese delegation will be coming soon, South Korea, India, the UK. So I think we are going to see a rapid succession of these deals that will give CEOs greater certainty. But I think nothing gives greater certainty than getting this tax bill done. I think it's unfortunate that the Chinese actually don't want to come and negotiate because they are the worst offenders in the international trading system. They have the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and I can tell you that this escalation is a loser for them. That they have some very smart, the economists, the academicians, technocrats within their bureaucracy, and they would be telling the leadership that we do not have the edge here. They are the surplus country, that their exports to the U.S. are 5 times our exports to China. So they can raise their tariffs, but so what? No one wins in a war, but it's proportionality, and the proportionality for the Chinese is going to be much worse. And the other thing too is, Maria, what would be a very good step with the Chinese would be acknowledging that the precursor chemicals for fentanyl come from China. They make their way into North America and then are sold into the U.S. We have more than 100,000 American citizens dying every year.
So what do you think about the tariff plan?
I think it is perfectly reasonable for someone to say that trade was unfair. There were unfair trade things. And remember, it's not just tariffs. It's tariffs. I think they have the VAT wrong, how they understand it. And I think they should really get a better understanding to make it easy to negotiate. But there are all these non-tariff barriers around food and energy, and then subsidies, which, China's famous for. So it's totally reasonable to say we want to make trade better. China and Russia have made it clear they want to kind of dismantle the post-World War II system. And I think the goal of all this trade stuff should be to make Europe and our trading partners, Japan, Korea, Philippines, stronger, not weaker, bring them closer as we build up our military. And any trade that protects military, that we should definitely do. But the point about national security is economic security, national security are almost directly related in the long run. We can't rely on any potential adversary for things we need for our military. And so, there I'm quite sympathetic. That we should do, that's absolutely paramount.
Do you personally expect a recession?
I am going to defer to my economists at this point, but I think probably that's a likely outcome.
Well, how significant a slowdown? I mean, are you seeing defaults?
Not yet, but I expect them. And the other thing, which we haven't had any slowdown or real recession, and COVID was so short, I almost don't include it, and so long that if you have rates going up a little bit, and inflation is sticky, and credit spreads are gapping out, which they're going to, I think you'll see more credit problems than people have seen in a long time.
My thanks to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and J.P. Morgan Chairman and CEO Jamie Dimon. Coming up, more on the breaking news on tariffs, exemptions, and the road ahead for President Trump's agenda with White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller coming next. Stay with us. Weekend as Customs and Border Patrol released detailed guidelines on the U.S.'s new tariff exemptions for certain products important to America, including semiconductors, electronic devices, AI servers, computers, smartphones. The president allowing tariff exemptions to the 145% levy on China. But the items are still subject to the initial 20% tariff related to the president's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, that's IEEPA. That's federal law that grants the president broad authority to regulate international commerce related to national security and emergencies. Joining me now with more in the Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the White House Deputy Chief of Staff on Policy, Stephen Miller. Stephen, it's great to see you this weekend. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And I called it breaking news because Border Patrol released this on Friday night. But I guess it's not such breaking news from your standpoint because you were targeting specific items from day one. Walk us through these exemptions, Stephen, and what they mean.
Yes, this is just another great example of how President Trump had a detailed plan from the beginning that's being executed exactly as directed. And unfortunately, some in the media are deliberately misportraying that plan. The original 20% IEEPA, that's the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, for China poisoning our citizens with fentanyl, that 20% rate is and continues to be applied to all imports from China. When the president issued his reciprocal tariffs, our government at the time specifically said that chips and semiconductors, which are critical components of our national security, were going to be dealt with through a separate commerce authority known as a 232. That was always the plan because those components are so essential to our national security. We need to have a separate process for dealing with how to reshore those essential industries. When the tariff rate went up to the full rate of 125 on top of the 20, it was necessary to publish a more detailed list from Customs and Border Protection explaining the rates and how they're applied. There are no exemptions. Everyone pays at least the 20%. And these particular components are being put through a separate process controlled by the Department of Commerce, which is the 232. So this is a sophisticated, elegant, detailed plan to deal with Chinese economic aggression against the United States.
Yeah, and look, I still expect, semiconductor companies, Apple, these companies that are exposed to this to trade higher in the stock market on Monday. I still, even though this was the plan from day one, but obviously markets are reacting to all of this. Stephen, what can you tell us about this 90-day period where President Trump is negotiating with our allies and on trade? Should we expect deals with countries like Japan and South Korea and India soon?
Well, as President Trump has said, he's dispatched his team, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, Jameson Greer, to have conversations with these countries and to explain to them their egregious trade abuses, how they've manipulated their currencies, how they have illegally subsidized their industries, and how they balloon the trade deficit. And that's going to lead to a bilateral process with each and every one of these countries. And I'm not going to prejudge that result. But the 90-day pause before the tariff rates snap back gives us an opportunity to have that conversation with each of these countries and to deal with these long-running, severe, and systemic abuses, while at the same time, and very importantly, focusing all of our attention and the attention of the entire international community on how China has distorted the entire global trading system through decades of intellectual property theft, trademark theft, copyright theft, industrial espionage, currency manipulation, illegal subsidization of critical industries, targeted dumping to destroy core manufacturing capacity in other countries so that they cannot protect and defend themselves in a time of national emergency. These are state-led policies from China that require redress, and the only scandal is that it took so long for us to finally have a president in Donald Trump who will protect and defend America from these abuses, while every other president, Democrat and Republican, allowed China to plunder us to a degree that was so savage and so total, it honestly eclipses the imagination.
It really does. And why? I mean, I cover this every single day and put a spotlight on the bad behavior, and that's being nice about it, of communist China. Why is it that we allow them to roll over America and undermine this great country every day?
And they've done it for decades. It is shameful that core elements of our industrial base, our medical base, our manufacturing base, our pharmaceutical base, our defense base, our electronic components, our chips, our critical minerals, that all of the things that power a country, we've allowed those supply chains to be centered in China, to give China the ability to exert that kind of control over the rest of the world through these illicit means. That's unthinkable. President Trump, history will record that the actions President Trump has taken in recent days were the beginning of saving the West from complete economic domination by another power.
But look, Stephen, during COVID, we learned that they may not send these critical elements to America. During COVID, you remember when the propaganda, the state media sent out a tweet saying, well, maybe we won't send the critical components, underlying components of prescription drugs to America right now. Let them get sick. Then suddenly that tweet was gone and you won't be able to find it anymore. But why wouldn't China make the decision not to send any of that, the critical rare earth minerals, right now?
Well, the United States also has considerable and profound economic leverage over China. First and most importantly, we underwrite the entire country. All of its development, all of its industrialization, all of its economic subsidies, all of those. When you see those photos of what cities in China looked like 10, 20 years ago, barren, desolate, and now these glittering skyscrapers, who do you think's paid for all of that? We did. We paid for literally all of it. So China, and we have other leverage in terms of, I don't want to get into it here, but there are many things that are essential to China's security that they need from the United States. So China would be very wise to pursue the path of de-escalation.
Do you believe China was selling treasuries this week?
I don't want to comment on that. All I want to say is that America is in the best position under President Trump to dominate the economic future because of how we are unleashing deregulation, exploring and opening American energy, including trillions of dollars in clean coal, and how we are on the verge of passing a tax bill that will provide economic certainty and make America into the most desirable place on planet Earth to shore jobs, invest, expand, hire, and grow. This is an economic strategy. Deal with China's abuses, deregulate, explode American energy production, create the most favorable tax system for American development on the face of the earth. That is the recipe for radical American success, Maria.
Stephen, it sounds fantastic, and thank you for your leadership on the border as well and stopping all of that fentanyl from coming in. Great to have you this morning. White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Quick break, and then the 119th Congress celebrates the first 100 days with a victory. House Speaker Mike Johnson is here. 100 days in office for the 119th Congress, during which time the Republican majority passed several bills, including the Laken-Riley Act, which the president signed into law, along with the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, Protecting American Energy Act, to prevent a ban on fracking, the Halt Fentanyl Act, and the Violence Against Women in by Illegal Aliens Act, among others. But the biggest victory hit this week when the House passed the Senate's budget blueprint to advance President Trump's agenda, which includes tax cuts, spending cuts, money for border security, defense, and energy, and puts lawmakers on a path to move forward with President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. And joining me right now is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson. Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Maria, great to be with you as always.
And congratulations to you on this, the 100th day in office for the 119th Congress. You have gotten so much done in this first 100 days. We are thrilled that you're with us on this day, day 100. Mr. Speaker, walk us through the passing of that budget on Friday before you all left for the Easter recess. Where does that put you now? What is the work to happen once you come back?
Well, thanks so much. It was a big milestone. We've had a number of those. As you noted, this is our 100th day of the 119th Congress, and we've been very busy delivering on the promises we made to the American people to help President Trump make America stronger and safer and more prosperous again. And passing that budget resolution was a big milestone. It really was, Maria, because what that does is it allows us to move one step closer to the one big beautiful bill that the President and all of us keep talking about. In this bill, we're going to cement so many of the promises we made on the campaign trail and check so many of the boxes of the America First agenda. I mean, it will be everything, as you know, from securing the border and making sure we have the resources necessary to do that in permanent fashion. We're going to revive the economy again by bringing about American energy dominance once more. Of course, we'll have lots of regulatory reform and the cutting of the red tape, and not the least of which, the big priority is to ensure the American people don't experience the biggest tax increase in their lives at the end of this year, which is what would happen by default if we didn't accomplish this mission.
Now, 2 Republicans voted against the legislation, and they voted with Democrats because they felt that there weren't enough spending cuts in this legislation.
Yeah, there's been a lot of deliberate negotiation, a lot of hard work done for more than a year, Maria, to get to this point. We started this process in March of last year. We expected and believed that we would have unified government. We would come to this moment of really incredible opportunity, and that is that we would have alignment. We would win the White House, the Senate, and the House, and we would be able to engage in this process. The beauty of the reconciliation process is because it's the one mechanism that allows you to get around the necessity of 60 votes in the Senate, and that's what's so important because we only have 53 Republicans there. But we have to get the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans, virtually every single one of them, aligned to make sure that while we extend the tax cuts, to your point, we also pay for them, because we all know that the national debt is probably the greatest single threat to our national security right now.
So knowing that 76% of the spending goes toward mandatory spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, where are the offsets?
Well, here's the key to all of it. The President has made absolutely clear many times, as we have as well, that we're going to protect Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid for people who are legally beneficiaries of those programs. There are a lot of Americans who rely upon those programs, and we've got to ensure that they're safeguarded. That's a big priority of the White House and the Republicans in Congress. At the same time, we have to root out fraud, waste, and abuse. We have to eliminate people on, for example, on Medicaid who are not actually eligible to be there. Able-bodied workers, for example, young men who should never be on the program at all. When you have people on the program that are draining the resources, it takes it away from the people that are actually needing it the most and are intended to receive it. You're talking about young single mothers, down on their fortunes at a moment. The people with real disabilities, the elderly, and we've got to protect and preserve that program. So we're going to preserve the integrity of it in this process. We have lots of categories of areas where the government is too large, it does too many things, and the DOGE efforts and others have highlighted that for the American people. So in this process, you're going to see in 11 different committees of jurisdiction across the House, members working hand in hand with their sleeves rolled up, working to carve out those inefficiencies. We're going to make government work better for the people in this legislation, in addition to checking all those boxes I mentioned earlier, and that Congress has dealt with in many decades, and arguably one of the most in all of its history.
So when you come back, the committees will get to work in terms of a surgical way to identify what to cut so that you can actually get that bill to the president's desk. Are you still counting on getting that bill by the end of May?
Yeah, the timing's critical, Maria, because for all the reasons you know and you've discussed on your show all the time and that we know, we have to show that stability to the markets. We have to send a message to the bond market, the stock market investors, to our allies around the world and our enemies as well, that America is on sound fiscal ground. And so we can bend the debt trajectory curve, get us back on a path to fiscal sanity and do all this. But the timing is important. The reason I put Memorial Day as our deadline is because the sooner we get it done, the better. It will really calm, I think, a lot of the things in the economy and start us back on that path to real recovery. That's why it's so important. And I think getting it done by the end of May is important as well because the debt limit cliff is approaching. Now, some projected it could happen in August or September, but depending upon tax receipts in this tax cycle, it could be pushed back on us further, maybe to early June. So we really have no margin for error.
Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the movements within the Congress is to, I guess, raise taxes on the rich in order to pay for these tax extensions for the lower earners, like the no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. The idea that you can have a new tax bracket of 40% for the highest earners. Are you seriously considering that?
Well, I'm not a big fan of doing that. I mean, we're the Republican Party, and we're for tax reduction for everyone. So, I mean, that's a general principle that we always try to abide by. There's lots of discussion, lots of ideas on the Hill. People have different thoughts and theories on how we can solve this perfect equation to get all of this done. But I wouldn't put any money on any of that yet. I guess everybody, I would say just stay tuned. The next 5 to 6 weeks are going to be critical as all these negotiations happen in the committees of jurisdiction. You'll hear a lot of that. We've got to build consensus. Remember, I've got to get 218 votes in the House, and we've got to get 51 votes in the Senate. So you can be assured that there'll be a comfort level of everyone before we move that bill to the floor.
Mr. Speaker, that wasn't the only victory that you had this past week. You also passed the voter ID law for federal elections, the SAVE Act. Now, Hakeem Jeffries said it's dead on arrival.
Yeah, those are big landmark achievements as well over the past week. It's been a busy time in Congress. Hakeem Jeffries is reflecting the sentiment of all the Democrats in the Congress, and it's quite sad. 208 House Democrats.
We might make some mistakes. Who knows?
I think one of the biggest problems we have in D.C. is that everyone's egos are too big.
I actually just prefer to have no titles rule.
You're opening yourself up.
Yeah,